The atmospheric transport vessel vibrated gently as it pierced through the dense cloud cover of Kithara, the planet's distinctive violet atmosphere growing richer with each descending moment. Marcus pressed his palm against the cool viewport, watching his breath create small clouds on the transparent surface as he gazed down at the extraordinary terrain below. Endless expanses of luminescent woodland stretched beneath the craft, filled with colossal trees whose branches seemed to pulse with inner light, while streams of liquid silver wound their way through the alien landscape. A mixture of wonder and nervousness churned in Marcus's stomach. This would be his dwelling for the next 12 months, Kithara, a world where the very atmosphere seemed to resonate with the deepest feelings of its inhabitants. The native Kitharans possessed an extraordinary ability to perceive the emotional auras of those around them, sensing innermost thoughts and feelings as naturally as humans might detect temperature changes. He smoothed down his uniform jacket, the rigid fabric of Terra's diplomatic corps feeling strangely out of place compared to the flowing, organic garments he observed the Kitharans wearing as they moved with ethereal grace through the spaceport below. In mere minutes, the transport would dock, and Marcus would begin his role in the interplanetary cultural exchange initiative, an opportunity for Terrans and Kitharans to learn from one another and bridge the vast differences between their civilizations. But Marcus's thoughts weren't focused on cultural diplomacy at this moment. His mind was consumed with anxiety about his assigned partner, a female Kitharan named Zara. The Kitharans were celebrated for their empathic abilities, capable of detecting emotional currents in others as clearly as humans could sense heat or cold. For them, emotional transparency wasn't optional, it was instinctive. Marcus had spent countless hours preparing for this assignment, studying everything available about their customs and traditions. Yet no amount of research could truly prepare him for living among beings who could potentially read his every emotional fluctuation, especially not when sharing living quarters with someone who might sense his deepest uncertainties. A gentle tremor brought him back to the present as the transport settled onto the landing platform. The doors hissed apart, and Marcus gathered his belongings, stepping out into the warm, aromatic air of the Kitharan capital city, Nephis. The scent was unlike anything he'd experienced, floral yet earthy, with a crispness that reminded him of morning mist over ancient forests. He shouldered his travel pack and followed his assigned escort through the city. Marcus couldn't help but marvel at how seamlessly the architecture blended with the natural environment. The structures, all flowing curves and crystal-like surfaces, appeared to emerge from the earth itself, their forms intertwined with the massive root systems of towering trees. Kitharans glided gracefully along the pathways, their elongated limbs and luminous violet skin giving them an otherworldly appearance. Occasionally, he caught one of them glancing in his direction, their large, luminous eyes lingering on him for moments that felt uncomfortably long. "They sense your apprehension," his escort said with an understanding smile, as if reading his thoughts. "They're simply curious, nothing more." Marcus managed a strained smile in response, feeling perspiration begin to form at the base of his neck. He had always been intensely private, even on Terra, and the prospect of living among beings who could sense his emotions disturbed him more than he cared to admit. What if they could feel his fear, his self-doubt? Would he be able to conceal anything at all? They arrived at an elegant, rounded structure nestled within a grove of ancient trees. "This is your residence," the escort said, gesturing toward the building. "Your partner Zara is waiting inside. She's been anticipating your arrival." Marcus took a steadying breath as he entered the dwelling. The interior was surprisingly inviting, with gentle illumination and smooth, organic walls that seemed to flow like liquid. His attention was immediately drawn to the figure standing at the far end of the main room. Zara. She was taller than he had anticipated, even for a Catherine with graceful, elongated limbs and skin that glowed with a soft violet luminescence. Under the ambient lighting, her platinum hair was woven in intricate braids that cascaded down her back, shimmering as she turned to greet him. But it was her eyes that caught him off guard, large, almond-shaped, and the color of deep amethyst. They seemed to look directly into his soul. For a moment, Marcus found himself speechless. "Welcome, Marcus," Zara said softly, her voice melodious and calming. She smiled, though there was a flicker of something else, perhaps curiosity, in her expression. "I trust the journey wasn't too exhausting?" Marcus cleared his throat, feeling warmth rise in his cheeks. No, it was fine. The planet is breathtaking." Her smile widened slightly. "I'm pleased you feel that way. You'll discover that Kithara has much to offer, not just in its natural beauty, but in its people." She gestured toward a small seating area near the window where minimalist furniture was arranged. "Please, make yourself comfortable." As Marcus settled into his seat, he felt an unusual sensation wash over him, as if the atmosphere in the room was subtly shifting. Zara's eyes flickered, and she tilted her head slightly. "You're anxious," she said gently, not as a question, but as a simple observation. Marcus blinked, momentarily surprised. Yes, somewhat. There's no point in denying it." Zara nodded, her gaze softening. "It's completely understandable. Our worlds are vastly different, but I believe you'll find we're not so different when it comes to what truly matters." Marcus exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Despite his initial tension, something about Zara's presence put him at ease. It was as if she could smooth the jagged edges of his nervousness simply by being near. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that she could perceive far more than she revealed. For the remainder of the evening, they discussed the practical aspects of cohabitation schedules, routines, and the unique aspects of each other's customs. Marcus learned that Kitharans maintained a profound connection to their environment, often spending hours in contemplation to harmonize themselves with the emotional energy surrounding them. In contrast, Marcus found himself feeling increasingly self-conscious, uncertain about how much of his inner thoughts and feelings were being laid bare before her. As their conversation continued, Marcus found himself growing more comfortable with Zara's presence, though part of him remained guarded. It was difficult to open up completely when he knew she might be able to sense every flicker of doubt or hesitation. Eventually, the sky outside darkened to a deep indigo, and Zara rose from her seat. "It's late. You should rest," she said, voice soft but firm. "Tomorrow will bring new experiences." Marcus nodded, standing and stretching. "Thank you, Zara. I appreciate your kindness." She gave him a small, knowing smile. "We'll talk more in the morning. I'm certain there's much we both have to learn." As Marcus retreated to his quarters, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. There was something about Zara, something that stirred emotions in him he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't just her beauty, though she was undeniably stunning. It was the way she seemed to perceive things beyond the surface, to see him in a way no one else had ever done. Lying in his bed, staring up at the softly glowing ceiling, Marcus wondered what the future held for him here on Kithara. Something told him that this journey was only beginning, and that Zara would play a far more significant role in it than he had ever anticipated. 2. The awakening the following morning, Kithara greeted Marcus with its characteristic serene beauty. The warm light from the binary star system streamed through the large window, casting shimmering patterns on the smooth, curved walls of his new quarters. For a brief moment, Marcus lay still, absorbing it all. The air was fragrant with the scent of the exotic, otherworldly blooms that dotted the landscape outside, their subtle fragrance a constant reminder of how far from Terra he truly was. He hadn't encountered Zara yet that morning. Their conversation the previous evening had left him intrigued. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, so calm, so attuned to the emotional undercurrents of everything around her. There was something about her presence that made him feel both understood and unsettled, as if she could strip away all the layers of his carefully constructed persona and see directly to his core. Shaking off the lingering haze of sleep, Marcus sat up and stretched. He decided a shower might help clear his mind. The water in the Ketheran facilities was oddly refreshing, cooler than what he was accustomed to, but invigorating in its own way. As he stood under the gentle spray, Marcus let his thoughts drift, the events of the past few days swirling in his mind. He hadn't expected to feel so displaced so quickly. The people of Kithara, with their violet skin and serene expressions, felt like something from a dream. Everything they did was graceful, fluid, and deliberate, as if they were in constant communion with the world around them. Marcus, on the other hand, was all too aware of his clumsy human movements. His emotions always so close to the surface. After his shower, he toweled off quickly and, feeling more relaxed than he had in days, slipped into his room. His muscles still hummed with the afterglow of the cool water, and his mind wandered to the work he had ahead. He had intended to dress immediately, but the warmth of the starlight filtering into the room made him pause. Instead, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, his towel draped loosely around his waist, lost in thought. Then it happened. The door to his room slid open with a soft hiss, and before Marcus could react, Zara stepped into the doorway. Her large amethyst eyes widened instantly as they fell upon him, upon his bare skin, still glistening with droplets of water from the shower, and the towel that barely covered him. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze. Zara stood motionless, her hand still on the door, her expression a mixture of surprise and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. Shock, embarrassment, he couldn't tell. But her wide eyes remained fixed on him, and he saw a faint ripple in the air around her, as if her emotions were radiating outward in invisible waves. Marcus scrambled to cover himself, instinctively pulling the towel tighter around his waist. "Zara, I'm sorry, I didn't think." But Zara didn't move. Her gaze lingered on him, and her expression shifted almost imperceptibly from shock to something more complex. Her violet skin, normally serene and cool, seemed to glow faintly in the soft light of the room, and Marcus couldn't help but notice the way her body seemed to tense, as if she was holding herself in place. For a moment, neither of them spoke. In Kitharan culture, nudity was a sacred thing, something reserved for the most intimate, private moments. It wasn't just about physical exposure. It symbolized emotional vulnerability, a complete opening of oneself to another. And now here was Marcus, exposed before Zara in a way he had never intended, in a way that was far more significant than just being seen naked. Finally, Zara took a step back, her hand still gripping the edge of the door. Her voice, when it came, was soft and breathless, barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to. I wasn't expecting. She trailed off, her dark eyes flickering between confusion and something deeper, something that made Marcus's heart pound in his chest. "It's okay," Marcus said quickly, his own voice thick with the awkwardness of the situation. He stood up, still clutching the towel around him. "I should have secured the door. My fault, really." But Zara's eyes remained fixed on him, and for the first time, Marcus could feel the intensity of her emotions, almost as if they were washing over him. He had known that Kitharans could perceive emotions, but he had never been on the receiving end of it like this. The air between them felt charged, heavy with an unspoken tension that neither of them knew how to address. Zara blinked, and the spell seemed to break. She stepped back fully into the hallway, her expression now carefully neutral, though Marcus could still see the faintest trace of color in her cheeks, if Kitharans could even blush. "I'll give you some privacy," she murmured, her voice still soft, almost fragile. And then, without another word, she turned and disappeared down the hallway. The door slid shut behind her, leaving Marcus standing there alone, still clutching his towel. For a moment, all he could do was stare at the door, his heart racing. What had just happened? It was more than just the awkwardness of being seen in an embarrassing moment. There had been something in Zara's reaction, something more than just surprise. Her shock had been too visceral, too charged with emotion. Marcus couldn't help but wonder what it meant in Kithran terms. He finished dressing quickly, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled over him. As he slipped on his shirt, his mind raced through the implications of what had just occurred. Kithrans were private people, reserved, serene, always in control of their emotions. For Zara to react the way she had, did it mean she was beginning to feel something for him? And if so, what was he supposed to do about it? By the time he stepped out of his room, Zara was nowhere to be seen. The rest of the dwelling was quiet, the warm glow of the Kithran suns casting long shadows on the floor. He wandered into the common area, hoping to find her, but the silence was almost oppressive. And then, just as he was about to call out her name, he heard a soft humming barely audible coming from the small meditation garden outside. Marcus followed the sound, stepping through the open doorway into the lush green space beyond. Seated on a smooth stone by the edge of the garden's pool was Zara. Her back was to him, her platinum hair cascading down her back, the soft glow of the Kithran suns highlighting her delicate features. She was humming a low, melodic tune that seemed to resonate with the very air around her. Marcus hesitated for a moment, not wanting to interrupt her meditation. But Zara must have sensed his presence, because she stopped humming and turned to face him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the awkwardness of the earlier encounter hung between them, heavy and unspoken. But there was something else in her gaze now, something deeper. An understanding, perhaps, or maybe even a hint of vulnerability. "Marcus," she said quietly, her voice as soft as the breeze that rustled the trees around them. I didn't mean to intrude earlier." "You didn't," Marcus replied, though the words felt inadequate. "It was just unexpected." Zara nodded, her dark eyes searching his face for something, though Marcus wasn't sure what. "In my culture," she began slowly, "what happened earlier? It's not something we take lightly. Nudity is a symbol of openness, of trust. It's something we reserve for those we are deeply connected to." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "I didn't realize. I mean, I knew your culture was different, but I didn't think." "It's okay," Zara interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "I know you didn't mean anything by it, but I felt something. I'm not sure what it was, but it was intense." Her gaze dropped, and for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her features. "I've never felt anything like that before." The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. What had he gotten himself into? This wasn't just about cultural misunderstandings. There was something deeper happening here, something that neither of them fully understood. And as Marcus looked at Zara, at the way her emotions seemed to shimmer in the air around her, he realized that whatever this was, it wasn't going away. "I don't know what this means," Marcus said quietly, stepping closer to her, "but I want to figure it out. Together." Zara looked up at him, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of emotions, curiosity, confusion, and something else Marcus couldn't quite name. But she nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes," she said softly. "Together." Chapter 3. The Dance of Hearts. The days that followed were a delicate dance of unspoken tension that wove itself between Marcus and Zara. Every glance, every shared moment felt charged with something new, something neither of them could articulate. Marcus found himself acutely aware of Zara's presence in ways he hadn't been before, how her movements seemed almost fluid, how her voice carried melodies that lingered in the air long after she spoke, and how her eyes, those deep amethyst pools, seemed to watch him with a kind of quiet intensity. For her part, Zara was equally affected. She could feel the shifts in Marcus's emotions, subtle ripples in the emotional energy that surrounded him. She had always sensed the emotions of others, but with Marcus, it was different. His emotions were raw, vibrant, and unguarded in a way that Kitharans rarely experienced. And the more time she spent with him, the more she found herself drawn to those emotions, curiosity, longing, confusion, and something deeper that made her heart race in ways she didn't fully understand. It was during one quiet evening, a few days after their awkward encounter, that everything began to change. The soft glow of Kithora's twin moons bathed the landscape in a silvery light, casting long shadows across the lush garden outside their home. Inside, the air was thick with the warmth of the day, and Marcus found himself lounging on the sofa, absent-mindedly flipping through a datapad filled with cultural texts. Zara sat across from him, her legs tucked beneath her on a low cushion, silently observing him as he read. The silence between them had become comfortable in its own way, but tonight it felt different, heavier, as if there was something waiting to be said. Marcus could feel Zara's eyes on him, and every time he glanced up, she quickly averted her gaze as though she was trying to hide something. Finally, unable to bear the weight of the silence any longer, Marcus set the datapad aside and looked directly at her. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Is something on your mind?" Zara hesitated, her fingers toying with the edge of the cushion she was sitting on. For a long moment, she said nothing, but then she met his gaze, and Marcus could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Marcus," she began, her voice low and hesitant, "I've been thinking about what happened the other day, about how I reacted." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He had been replaying that moment over and over in his mind, wondering what it had meant for her. "You don't have to explain," he said quickly, wanting to ease her discomfort. "I understand that it was a cultural thing. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." But Zara shook her head, her expression serious. "It's not just that. Yes, in Kitharan culture, nudity is something sacred, but it's more than that. What I felt when I saw you, it wasn't just shock, it was something else." She paused, searching for the right words, "something I've never felt before." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He leaned forward slightly, the space between them suddenly feeling too vast. "What do you mean?" Zara looked down at her hands, her long fingers tracing invisible patterns on the cushion. "I could feel your emotions, Marcus. I could feel your embarrassment, your awkwardness, but there was something else, something deeper, something you weren't even aware of. It was like a spark, a connection that lit up the air between us. And ever since then," she trailed off, her cheeks tinged with a faint violet blush. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Zara," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I felt it too." Her eyes flicked up to meet his, wide and searching. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt thick with unspoken words, emotions hanging in the space, like the scent of the strange flowers that bloomed outside. "I don't understand it," Marcus continued, his voice growing more urgent. "I've never felt this way before. Not like this. It's like there's something pulling me toward you, and I don't know how to stop it." Zara's breath hitched slightly, her chest rising and falling with sudden intensity. She could feel the emotions radiating from Marcus' desire, confusion, fear. They swirled around him, raw and unfiltered, and it was intoxicating in a way she had never experienced. Kitharans were always so controlled, so careful with their emotions. But Marcus was different. His emotions were like a storm, wild and unpredictable, and Zara found herself drawn to that storm in ways she hadn't anticipated. Slowly, almost tentatively, she stood and crossed the room, her bare feet making no sound on the smooth floor. Marcus watched her approach, his heart pounding in his chest. Every step she took seemed to resonate in the air between them, heightening the tension that had been building for days. When she reached him, Zara hesitated for just a moment, her dark eyes searching his face. Then, with a deep breath, she reached out and gently placed her hand on his arm. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it sent a shockwave through Marcus, as if her touch had ignited something deep within him. "I can feel it too," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "This ... whatever this is between us. It's more than just curiosity. It's something real." Marcus couldn't speak. He could only nod, his throat tight with the emotion swirling inside him. He had never felt this kind of intensity before, this kind of connection with anyone. And as he looked into Zara's eyes, he realized that it wasn't just about physical attraction. It was something deeper, something he couldn't fully explain but knew was there. Without thinking, he reached up and placed his hand over hers, their fingers intertwining. The moment their hands touched, Zara gasped softly, her emotions flaring in a way that Marcus could almost feel in the air around them. Her control, the careful calm she always maintained, seemed to slip for just a moment, and he could see the desire in her eyes, the vulnerability she had tried to hide. "Marcus," she breathed, her voice barely audible. It was all the invitation he needed. In one fluid motion, Marcus rose from the sofa, pulling her gently toward him. Their bodies were so close now that he could feel the warmth radiating from her, could see the way her breath quickened as she looked up at him. For a moment, they stood there, suspended in the tension between them, neither daring to move, as if the slightest shift would shatter the fragile balance they had found. Then, slowly, tentatively, Marcus leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both testing the boundaries of this new connection. But then something shifted, something broke open between them, and the kiss deepened, growing more urgent, more intense. Zara's hands slid up to his shoulders, her fingers tightening against his skin as she leaned into him, her body pressing against his in a way that felt both natural and exhilarating. Marcus's mind was a whirlwind of sensations. The softness of her lips, the way her body seemed to fit perfectly against his, the faint hum of her emotions buzzing in the air around them. Every touch, every movement sent a jolt of electricity through him, and he could feel the intensity of her desire matching his own. But even as the kiss grew more heated, more passionate, there was something else there, something deeper, something that went beyond the physical. It was as if their emotions were intertwining, becoming one, and for the first time in his life, Marcus felt completely open, completely vulnerable. Chapter 4. The binding of souls. Marcus and Zara's emotional connection had deepened beyond what either had anticipated. As their hands met, the intensity of the emotions they shared flowed between them, making them both realize just how profound their bond had become. In this moment, they understood that what was unfolding between them was something special, something beyond mere curiosity. Zara looked into Marcus's eyes, seeing trust and acceptance reflected back at her. The space between them disappeared, but it wasn't just a physical closeness, it was an emotional one. In Kitharan culture, such closeness was reserved for those with a profound emotional connection, and Zara had found that with Marcus. Marcus approached her gently, his touch filled with care and respect. They didn't need words to communicate what they felt. The emotional energy between them was almost tangible, a silent agreement that what they were sharing went beyond mere attraction. In that quiet moment, they embraced, feeling the weight of their connection as it wrapped around them like a warm, comforting blanket. This intimacy was more than just physical, it was emotional and spiritual. They were united in a way that transcended the surface, deepening their bond in ways they hadn't fully understood before. As the night wore on, Marcus and Zara remained close, realizing that they had not only strengthened their trust in each other, but also discovered the precious depth of the connection that now bound them together. Chapter 5. The weight of choice. The days following their shared moment were like stepping into uncharted territory. Marcus and Zara, once tentative and careful around each other, now moved with a different energy, one filled with quiet understanding. The air between them no longer carried the weight of unspoken tension, but instead held a deep connection that they both felt, though they rarely put it into words. Marcus found himself thinking about Zara constantly, the way she moved with effortless grace, the way her voice seemed to carry the melody of the world around her, and most of all, the way her emotions flowed through the air between them, touching him in ways he'd never thought possible. The bond they had formed wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual even, and Marcus was slowly coming to realize that what he felt for her was far more profound than he had initially understood. Yet, with this growing bond came a sense of conflict that Marcus couldn't ignore. His time on Kythera was temporary. The exchange initiative was never meant to be permanent. There was a part of him that knew he would eventually have to make a choice: stay here in this alien world that was slowly becoming home, or return to Terra, where the familiarity of his old life awaited him. But that old life now felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Marcus was deep in thought one afternoon, sitting outside in the soft light of the twin suns, when Zara approached him. She moved silently, as she always did, her step so light that he didn't hear her until she was standing beside him. He looked up, and their eyes met. There was something different in her gaze today, something that made his heart skip a beat. "Marcus," she said softly, sitting down next to him on the stone bench, "there's something we need to talk about." The seriousness in her tone immediately grabbed his attention. He sat up straighter, his pulse quickening. "What is it?" Zara hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the bench, her eyes cast downward for a moment before she met his gaze again. "I can feel your conflict," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I can feel how torn you are between this world and your own. And I think it's time we face what that means." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He had known this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. He looked away, staring at the distant horizon where the shimmering forests of Kythera met the sky. "I don't know what to do," he admitted after a long pause. "This place, it's become more than just a temporary assignment for me. And you ... He stopped, struggling to find the right words. "You've become more important to me than I ever expected." Zara's expression softened, and she reached out to take his hand, her touch warm and familiar. "I feel the same," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we both know your time here was never meant to be permanent. And I can't ask you to stay, not when you have a whole life waiting for you back on Terra." Marcus's chest tightened at the thought of leaving her. The idea of returning to Terra, of resuming his life there without her, felt like an impossibility. He had come to Kythera to learn, to explore, but he had never expected to find something or someone who would change him so deeply. Zara had become more than just a companion. She had become a part of him, and the thought of losing her now was unbearable. "I don't want to leave," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I don't want to go back to Terra without you." Zara's grip on his hand tightened, and for a moment she closed her eyes as if struggling to keep her emotions in check. When she opened them again, there was a sadness there that Marcus hadn't seen before. "Marcus, I want you to stay," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I don't want you to feel like you have to. I've seen your memories, your feelings for your home. I've felt your longing for Terra, even if you don't always acknowledge it. And I know what it's like to miss the place you come from." Marcus stared at her, his mind racing. He had never fully realized just how much Zara could feel, how deeply she could understand his emotions, even the ones he hadn't put into words. But there was something else. Something unspoken in the way she was looking at him now, as if she was preparing herself for a difficult truth. "I've never told you this," she continued, her voice barely a whisper, "but KY and S. We don't just feel emotions. We're bound by them. Our connections once made are nearly impossible to break, and the connection I formed with you, it's stronger than anything I've ever felt before." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. "What are you saying?" Zara looked down at their intertwined hands, her thumb brushing lightly over his skin. "I'm saying that if you stay, if we choose to be together, it won't just be for a short time. It will be forever. That's the way my people are. We don't love lightly, and I can't ask you to make that choice unless you're sure it's what you want." Marcus was silent for a long moment, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy blanket. Forever. The word echoed in his mind, and with it came the realization that this wasn't just a decision about staying on Kithara or returning to Terra. It was a decision about his future, about who he wanted to be and who he wanted to be with. He looked into Zara's eyes, and for the first time, he truly understood what she was offering him, a life together, a bond that went beyond anything he had ever experienced. But it was also a life that would require him to leave behind everything he had known, to step fully into this new world and never look back. "I don't know if I'm ready for forever," he admitted, his voice shaking slightly. "But I know I don't want to lose you. I don't want to go back to Terra and spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." Zara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she nodded, a small, sad smile tugging at her lips. "I don't want to lose you either," she whispered, "but I also don't want you to regret your choice." Marcus swallowed hard, his mind racing. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, but as he looked at Zara, at the way her emotions seemed to wrap around him like a protective embrace, he realized something important. He had already made his choice, even if he hadn't fully acknowledged it yet. "I want to stay," he said, the words coming out with a certainty that surprised even him. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that whatever it is, I want it to be with you." Zara's breath hitched, and for a moment, she just stared at him as if she couldn't believe what she had heard. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, a smile filled with relief, with joy, and with a love that Marcus could feel radiating through the air between them. Without another word, she pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly as if she were afraid he might disappear. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, feeling the warmth of her body against his, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, and for the first time since arriving on Kithara, he felt at peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever sacrifices they would have to make, he knew they would face them together. And in that moment, under the soft light of the twin suns, Marcus and Zara made an unspoken promise to each other, a promise of love, of trust, and of a future they would build side by side. As they stood there, holding each other, Marcus realized that he had found something far more important than he had ever expected on this distant planet. He had found a home,